The Denver Broncos are getting new uniforms, and hopefully we'll get a new quarterback in the final mock draft Monday episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country, and welcome into the final mock drafts Monday edition, at least for 2024, of Locked on Broncos. My name is Sayre Bedinger, co-host of the Locked on Broncos podcast, and we appreciate every single one of you for tuning in right here on the Locked on Podcast Network every single day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. So visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started today. Broncos Country, today's a big day. Of course, the Denver Broncos are revealing their brand new uniforms on Monday, and there's been some leaks and some controversy surrounding that over the weekend, but this is a big week overall for the team. Not only are you getting new uniforms, but a brand new quarterback expected to be added to the mix at some point here in this year's draft. Of course, that's the way things are trending. That's kind of the way things have been shaping up over the course of the offseason, as the Broncos really passed on every opportunity that they had to add quarterbacks up to this point. Now, they could still add somebody. A Ryan Tannehill still available. Zach Wilson could be available in a trade. Nothing's really going to move the needle, though, as far as a franchise quarterback option than drafting somebody, and especially when we're talking about drafting somebody high. So on today's episode of Locked on Broncos, we are going to go through a full mock draft scenario for the Denver Broncos. And our goal, really, it's got to be to get a quarterback, right? It's got to be to at least come away with somebody that we believe can start in the NFL going forward. And Broncos general manager George Paton said recently at the team's pre-draft press conference, he said that they believe this quarterback class is 7 or 8 guys deep. They believe that a lot of guys from this class can play. And I think Sean Payton has a history of not necessarily arrogance when it comes to whoever he wants at the QB position. But look, he put together a lot of winning teams in New Orleans with the Saints without having to ever spend a first or second round pick on the quarterback position. Now, Drew Brees played a huge factor in that, having a couple of former first round picks come through the system in Teddy Bridgewater and Jameis Winston. That played a factor as well. But as far as the NFL draft is concerned, never has Sean Payton used a first round pick at the position or second round pick at the position as a head coach in the league. George Paton has done it a couple of times. Christian Ponder back in 2011, Teddy Bridgewater in 2015. So there's some precedence there, but these two guys, it would be a first for Payton. It would be historic for Payton. And for the Denver Broncos, if they move up even just a little bit, it will be the highest drafted quarterback in franchise history, topping potentially Jay Cutler, who was the 11th overall pick back in 2006. So without further ado, Broncos Country, let's get into this simulation. We're going to use the NFL mock draft database simulator here. And the reason for that is just to flip up a little bit. You never know where consensus rankings, things like that. You just want to go into it without any bias. And I want you to be able to see my thought process through this. So if you're listening to the podcast, I'll take you through a few different players that were available at the time of selection. And if you're watching the podcast on YouTube, you can see and follow along with this process as we go. So we're going to get this draft started, and we are going to allow for potential trade scenarios in this, because I feel like the Denver Broncos, they could very well be a trade down candidate in the first round. Now, they could also be a trade up candidate, which you don't really get those kind of opportunities in most mock draft simulators, but we're going to try to find a trade that the Broncos can move down in the first round a few spots and still manage to get a possible second round pick in the mix here, because I think that's what this team really needs to add. So as you can see with all these draft offers, these trade offers that came in, nobody's offering anything that involves a second round pick in the 2024 draft. So what I want to do is I want to take you through a scenario that I kind of view as realistic for the Denver Broncos. There's a few teams that could make a lot of sense to trade down at this point. The Los Angeles Rams picking 19th overall, the Pittsburgh Steelers picking 20th, the Philadelphia Eagles picking 22nd. I think Philadelphia is really the sweet spot for the Broncos to try to trade down here to give number 12 for their 22nd overall pick. Plus, they have two selections in the second round, number 50 and 53 overall. Let's just say the Broncos are able to get the better of those two. That actually works out great on the trade value chart. It's very fair. The Eagles might even have to add another additional pick on top of that. But look, there's some relationship equity there. The Broncos have done a number of deals between George Paton and Howie Roseman. There's relationship equity between Vic Fangio and Sean Payton. And Fangio needs corners for his new defense there. And the Eagles have a couple of old corners, Darius Slay, James Bradbury. So I think they'd be willing to make that move up the board. And that gives us an opportunity now to move forward in this mock draft scenario with the 22nd overall pick and also a second round choice there at number 50 overall. So Broncos Country, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see this at 22 overall. I think this is a very realistic scenario here where the top players on the board are Florida State's Jared Verse and UCLA's Latu. I think those two guys would be almost can't miss players for the Denver Broncos in the NFL draft. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm not even really going to think twice about this. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make Latu the Denver Broncos first round pick at number 22 overall. And I'm going to hit pause right away because I think there's a scenario here that we could look at. But let's talk about Latu just a little bit here because this is the type of player that could be a game changer off the edge for you. I think that we've seen a number of comparisons in recent weeks between him and TJ Watt of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And remember, Watt lasted deep into the first round for a number of the same reasons as Latu might in this year's draft. But the primary reason why Latu is falling or could fall in this draft is due to medical concerns. He was essentially considered medically retired for a full season when he was still with the Washington Huskies program. Now, for the Denver Broncos' sake, you get a private visit with him. He came to the facility, did a top 30. Why do players come to the facility for a top 30? Well, it's not always for good reasons, right? I mean, you could be considering selecting this player, or maybe you bring in guys to differentiate. Hey, what do we think about this guy compared to this guy? There's questions that need to be answered typically when you bring a guy in for a top 30 visit, which the Broncos did for both Verse and Latu. But I think Latu gives you something off the edge that you don't currently have. It's somebody who's going to be able to consistently give you I'm not going to say sack per game, but he's that type of guy that you can rely on consistent pass rush productivity. He's very advanced in terms of his overall pass rush skills. He's got all of the physical traits. George Paton in his first draft for the Broncos, he tried to get Jalen Phillips, tried to move back up to get Jalen Phillips, who ended up going to the Miami Dolphins there. Couldn't quite formulate that trade, but wanted to come away from that draft with PS2 and Jalen Phillips. I think the Broncos have been searching for that top dog off the edge for quite some time. You trade Von Miller away. You trade Bradley Chubb away. Randy Gregory doesn't work out in free agency. Clearly, the Broncos have had a plan to potentially bring in somebody off the edge. I think they do that in this draft by getting somebody like Latu, the stud pass rusher out of UCLA. But the Denver Broncos are not done yet. We are going to get a quarterback come hell or high water in this Mock Draft Monday edition, Locked On Broncos. Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL, and baseball is back in full swing. FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs, slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. This episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I've been told that I'm a competitive person. You know what? I don't even need to be told that. I know that I'm a competitive person. I'm one of those types that maybe I'm like you. I hate losing more than I even love winning. And yeah, I have a competitive side. We all do. And my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it already. It's been downloaded over 150 million times, and it's a great twist on Monopoly where you can play not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part, if you're competitive, it's messing with your friends, right? Hey, I can charge my friends rent on my iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly, but now I can also heist their vaults of riches for myself. And the leaderboards, they show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. It's not just my competitive side that loves it, though. You can team up with your friends and people all around the world in timed tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game, join your friends, download Monopoly Go now for free on the App Store or Google Play. We are moving on up for a quarterback prospect in this Mock Draft Monday edition of Locked On Broncos. But before we go any further in this mock draft, I want to say thank you and give a huge shout out to every single one of you that makes Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. And if you listen to the podcast on any podcast platform, or if you watch the show on YouTube, you know that you're rocking with us all offseason. You're going to get every bit of Denver Broncos news, content, and coverage and more that you want. Cody and I will be breaking down and reacting to the Broncos uniform reveal, every single draft pick, every single undrafted free agent, anybody the Broncos pick up via trade or free agency after or during the draft. We are going to have you covered. So stay tuned, turn on notifications, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and tune into the show every single day. Broncos Country, we got Latu off the edge in round 1, but I think that if the Broncos move down in the first round, they have to find a way to come away with a quarterback. Now, there's a number of quarterback prospects that could fall down the board in the first round that could be intriguing for the Denver Broncos. Bo Nix, we've heard his name connected to the Denver Broncos a ton. Michael Penix Jr., the only guy, as far as we know, that came to Denver for a top 30 visit this offseason. And then Spencer Rattler's name has been getting a lot of hype lately. Who are the Broncos coming away with? Well, in order to make sure that you get your guy, if the Broncos take a pass rusher there at number 22 overall, I don't think they can just stand pat and wait at number 50 overall. You got to use your connections. You got to get back into the first round, in my opinion, or you got to move up near the top of the second round, because there's going to be jockeying. Teams are going to talk themselves into these quarterbacks all night, Thursday night, and they're saying, well, Bo Nix is still sitting there at 33 overall. What do we got to give up to get that pick from Carolina? Or, Michael Penix Jr., or same for even Spencer Rattler. I think for the Denver Broncos, the wise move is to strike a trade. And we're going to go to Sean Payton's old pal, Dan Campbell in Detroit. We're going to go after that 29th overall pick. Now, what's it going to take to move up from 50 to 29? Well, I think the Broncos, I think ideally you want to keep that third round draft selection this year. And Brad Holmes, the general manager of the Detroit Lions, has shown a willingness to go after guys with future capital. So I think the Broncos, they move up with that third round pick, or the second round pick that they got from Philadelphia, and you try to get it with maybe a 2025 third round pick. Maybe you got to sweeten the pot with a fifth, something like that, but get the deal done by offering a couple of picks to move back into the first round from 50 overall. Get that late first round pick from somebody that you have relationship equity with, like a Dan Campbell, and now you're sitting there at number 29 overall. This is where you can go and get your quarterback. Now, as you see here on the board, we're looking at a situation where Michael Penix Jr., he's still there. Bo Nix is still there. If you're looking at other positions, which is not really the purpose of this mock draft scenario, I mean, there's Xavier Worthy has been tied to the Broncos. Jordan Morgan, the offensive tackle from Arizona, he's been tied to the Broncos. Jerzon or Johnny Newton from Illinois, he's got a connection to the Broncos in new defense defensive backs coach and pass game coordinator Jim Leonard, who was an analyst there at Illinois last year. But we're here at the back end of round one, not to necessarily double up on non-quarterbacks. We are here to get a quarterback, and we're going to take Bo Nix, the guy who has been often rumored to the Denver Broncos, a guy that has been consistently considered one of the best fits for Sean Payton. Is it a bit of an underwhelming selection? Maybe to some, but Bo Nix does a lot of things well that I think could translate to him being a very quick starter for the Denver Broncos in the NFL. And getting back into the back end of round one, what does that do for you? It gives you that 5th-year option on the player's contract to be able to this could take some time, right? And the Broncos evaluation here could take some time, or it just helps financially speaking. If a guy balls out in the first 3-4 years, now you've got him on a team-friendly contract for a handful of years, as opposed to maybe saying, well, we took him in the second round. He really blossomed in year 3. Now we've got to start the clock on getting that new contract going. It's just so beneficial for the team to be able to go after a guy there at the back end of round one. So if the Broncos can come away from this year's first round with Laiatu, Latu, and Bo Nix in the first round, boy, I think we'd all be sleeping real well Thursday night, knowing that they addressed two of the easily the biggest needs positionally on this roster. When you talk about, you need to upgrade the pass rush, you need to upgrade the defensive front, you've got to get tougher there, you've got to get more consistent there. Laiatu Latu makes everybody better on that defensive front, and Bo Nix is somebody that, hey, he'd be the first round quarterback Sean Payton's working with, and certainly he would be the first quarterback that George Paton has ever drafted for the Denver Broncos. It would be the most recent first round quarterback since Paxton Lynch, but because you traded back and then traded up, there's a little bit less of an attachment of, hey, we sold the farm to get this guy. You did trade up for him, but certainly you didn't give up anything that you can't recoup later on. I think this would be an ideal scenario for the Broncos. Come away with an elite pass rush prospect and come away with a quarterback prospect that Sean Payton and Davis Webb and that whole brain trust at the quarterback position offensively, Joe Lombardi, and the guys that are Pete Carmichael. There's so many different guys that are going to have hands in this evaluation process and evaluating these guys personally. I like Bo Nix for a lot of different reasons. He showed consistent improvement. He can run the quick passing game. He's coachable. He was a former 5-star prospect who's underrated athletically. He can sling it when he needs to. He can hit deep throws downfield. I know that the stigma around him is like, well, he doesn't have enough of a passing game outside of the short passing game that's basically an extension of your running game. But what I think Bo Nix brings to you is efficiency, accuracy. And I know that there's question marks about that even. So look, Broncos country, at the end of the day, if Sean Payton takes Bo Nix, if he takes Michael Penix Jr., if he takes Spencer Rattler, if he trades up and gets JJ McCarthy, what are we doing? We're trusting in Sean Payton because the dude knows the quarterback position extremely well. And I believe that he showed in year 1 with the Denver Broncos that he's the right guy to turn around this program. He's the right guy to turn around the trajectory of the franchise. And so I'm trusting in Sean Payton with whoever he takes at the quarterback position. And I think Bo Nix and Laiatu Latu, if the draft ended there for the Broncos, I mean, that would still be, you're addressing 2 top-tier positions of need for this team. But look, we still have a variety of selections left, 6 more picks to be taken from the 3rd through the 6th round. And we are going to blaze through those picks as we get to the final segment here on Locked On Broncos. Are we going to add some depth at receiver? Could we get another playmaker at the running back position? Where does this team need depth? Where do they need to take some shots? We're going to do exactly that on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever had any frustrating experiences buying tickets? I think that'd be just about every single one of us here today. We've all had a difficult experience, especially if it was an MLB game, right? It's MLB season. You're trying to find good seats or maybe last minute tickets, and there's just no good deals out there. Well, Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your potential seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time does what everyone wants, takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. And you can take a look through the app and see. I was just looking through the other day trying to find out, hey, are my Cubbies coming to play Kansas City? I'm about 3 hours away from Kansas City. Are they coming to play the Royals this year? So I'm able to just open up the Game Time app and easily scroll through the schedule and list of games and list of seats that are available, so I can take my wife and kids to go watch the Chicago Cubs hopefully whip up on the Kansas City Royals. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. If you go out and get yourself a first round quarterback, you've got to make sure that you support the guy and get him some help. And that's exactly what we're going to do on this final mock draft Monday edition of Locked on Broncos as we approach the 2024 NFL draft. And we can't thank you enough for rocking with us every single day right here on the Locked on Podcast Network, free and available everywhere that you get your podcasts every single day. And Cody and I are really appreciative of every one of you in Broncos country for all of your thoughts and ideas that you submit and the ways that you interact with us on Twitter and on YouTube and things like that. So Broncos country, we high salute to every single one of you for tuning in to the show every single day and for engaging with us and rocking with us. Here we are. We've got the 3rd through 6th rounds essentially for the Denver Broncos left in this mock draft scenario. We've taken Latu from UCLA. We've taken Bo Nix, the quarterback out of Oregon. And now that you've got a quarterback on the roster, I think the next best thing that you can do is surround him with the appropriate talent. Now, as you look at the board here, if you're watching the podcast on YouTube, you see guys like Jatavian Sanders, Trey Benson, things like that in the 3rd round. And, you know, there may be a scenario where you say, look, if this situation presents itself, you've got to go for it. I'm personally the type that I say, you know what, let's go a little bit more into the realm of realism here and see what the Denver Broncos could do to upgrade this roster. I know that one thing that this team could end up doing is taking another skill player. We could see a trade of Cortland Sutton during the NFL draft. I know ESPN's Jeremy Fowler said over the weekend that that the Broncos, they're not really necessarily looking to trade, or they don't plan to trade Sutton as of right now. But hey, in the NFL draft, those plans can change, and somebody might be willing to deal for him. I don't know that his future in Denver is going to be very certain beyond this year anyway. A player that I really like, UCF wide receiver Javon Baker, former Alabama transfer, averaged over 21 yards a catch last season. I think this is kind of the sweet spot where you look for a receiver, maybe even somebody that could contribute in the return game, with Marvin Mims expected to get a bit of a bigger role there. I like Javon Baker. We haven't necessarily seen him connected too much to the Denver Broncos, but ultimately that doesn't really matter. I'm going with Javon Baker there at pick number 76 overall. You can see the simulator doesn't love the value there, but maybe just positionally, and maybe you could insert name here for a receiver prospect there in round 3, as it does sound like the Broncos are interested in potentially doing that. Now here we get to round 4, the 121st overall selection on day 3 of the NFL draft. You're looking for upside plays. You're looking for guys that could potentially contribute for you on special teams, contribute in a versatile role. And I'm so glad that this guy is here. Ben Sinnott from Kansas State, the tight end, fullback, H-back, do everything. Athletically speaking, he's one of the best in this year's class. We're going to go ahead and pick him up, especially with the concerns over the longevity of somebody like Greg Dulcich, who, you know, he's 2 years into his NFL career, and we just haven't seen enough of him on the field to be able to pass altogether on some of the top tight end prospects in this class. Now we get into the fifth round, where I feel like the Broncos could do a number of different things here. Of course, as you get into day 3 of the draft, you're not necessarily going for need or anything like that. You want to get the best possible player available. The Broncos have kind of almost back-to-back picks here. Another area of the offense that I see this team attacking is the running back position. So maybe this spot right here between the 4th and 5th rounds is an area where you could say insert running back here. I know the Broncos have looked at Ray Davis. They brought him in for a top 30 visit, but again, you can't always put all of your stock into that. Hey, they brought him in for a visit. Obviously, that means they're going to draft him or sign him as an undrafted free agent. Could mean that. It may mean that, but you just don't know at this point. A guy that I think, hey, he's got the versatility, he's got the athletic traits, played receiver, played some running back. It may be a slight bit of a reach here in the 5th round, but I'm going to go ahead and take Purdue's Tyrone Tracy Jr. to give us a valuable option and maybe somebody that could contribute as well in the return game. Now, we've gone offense 4 straight picks. We've got to give some love to the defensive side of the ball. I know the Broncos have talked about wanting to get more athletic at the linebacker position. Certainly Trevin Wallace, who's going to be drafted way before this in all likelihood, he would help you do that. There's a number of other guys. It's almost a cheat code to go with somebody like a Jordan McGee here out of Temple, who just graded exceptionally well in terms of athleticism, made a ton of plays there at Temple. I do think this is a guy that the Broncos are going to target on day 3 of the draft, maybe as high as round 4. I'm going to take Jordan McGee here at pick number 147 overall. I know the big board doesn't like that selection much there, but look, as Sean Payton said, even at number 1 overall, everybody's got a huge difference in the way that they perceive players on their overall big boards. The further away that you get from that first overall pick, the more different each of these big boards is going to look across the league. So I think that's an area where we could see the Denver Broncos maybe do something a little bit against the grain in terms of as you get further away from the first round, they're going to target specific guys that Sean Payton and George Payton and the coaching staff really like. So that's kind of what I see happening there. I love that pick of Jordan McGee. Tip Ryman at number 203 overall would be an outstanding value. He's just not somebody that I see necessarily being there for the Broncos. So in the realm of realism, I'm not going to go there. Caden Wallace is an interesting name, potential developmental offensive lineman that the Broncos could look at. I know they've talked with Brevin Spanford, the tight end from Minnesota here. Again, when you get to day 3 of the draft and you get deep down the board like this, you can really go any variety of ways. And the Broncos, they're not necessarily looking for an immediate starter here. You might be looking at a guy who fell because of medical reasons and could end up being a future starter for you. That was what Austin Forsyth was last year for this team. So maybe you're looking at somebody like that. Maybe you want to upgrade in the secondary. You know what? Let's do that. George Payton, he loves the secondary. DeCameron Richardson from Mississippi State got those long arms, the speed for days. He could be somebody that could contribute for you on special teams at the very least right away. So we're going to take DeCameron Richardson out of Mississippi State there in the 6th round. And with our final selection here, Broncos Country, again, you could go a number of different ways with this pick. You could go with a coach's favorite. How about the Broncos? You upgrade that special teams unit. Now, look, I've got to include an Iowa Hawkeye in the final mock draft, right? I've got to find a way to do it. Tyrone Tracy, he transferred to Purdue, all right? He used to be Iowa. We got to get a true Hawkeye, a Hawkeye that finished his collegiate career at Iowa, played as, Tory Taylor is one of the best special teams players in this entire draft. I know the Broncos currently have Riley Dixon as their punter, but look, somebody like Tory Taylor in the Mile High Air, that guy is going to be a huge asset for you. And if you're starting a rookie quarterback, how important is it to have a dominant special teams unit? The Broncos were so much better there last year than they had been in previous years. But look, this is a really strong class, in my opinion. Of course, I put together the class, but you tell me what you think. Latu in the 1st round, your top pick. You get a top flight edge player, maybe the best pass rusher in this class, and he falls a little bit maybe due to medicals, maybe a little bit due to the fact that he's already over 23 years old. Bo Nix, you trade back into the first round and you get that fifth-year option. You get a quarterback that Sean Payton believes in, that this coaching staff believes in, and somebody who, quite frankly, if another opportunity presents itself next year, like Dak Prescott in free agency, or maybe somebody becomes available in a trade, or maybe the Broncos are picking in the top 5 of the draft again, it's not going to hurt you to move on from a guy you drafted 29th overall. So a relatively risk-free investment there to get somebody who could potentially be a franchise quarterback. Then you go and get him some weapons, right? You get Javon Baker, the big play guy out of UCF. You get Ben Sinnott, the tight end out of Kansas State, who was connected to the Denver Broncos quite a bit at the Senior Bowl. Tyrone Tracy, a running back / wide receiver / maybe a new asset, new addition to the return game. Somebody who just knows how to make plays with the ball in his hands out in space. George Payton wants to get more athletic at linebacker. Jordan McGee is going to do that for you. You take a shot on the secondary, DeCameron Richardson there at 203 overall, and you upgrade the special teams by getting Torrey Taylor, a 6th-round pick out of Iowa, to close things out. So Broncos country, all things considered here, this draft scenario could end up being, I mean, you want to see the Broncos take a D lineman. That's the one area that I really struggled with here as we were putting this together. You want to have all the new additions to the offense. You need to upgrade the passing game. You need to upgrade your pass catching game. You need to upgrade the return game. You need to get, the Broncos have a lot of areas that they need to address in this draft. So you got to get the best possible players. The one thing that I would say to critique myself here, would love to get more of a defensive line presence, but Latu, like I said, he's going to make everyone better. And maybe the Broncos dip into the free agent pool after the NFL draft is over there. So Broncos country, the NFL draft merely days away. Soon we will have answers to all these questions that we currently have about the franchise. We'll know who's going to be maybe the new starting quarterback in 2024 rocking these new jerseys. But I want to say thank you once again to every single one of you for rocking with us right here on Locked On Broncos every single day. On tomorrow's show, Cody will be back, and he and I will be discussing those new uniforms as well as a couple of other odds and ends about the franchise that we all love. So Broncos country, salute to every single one of you, and we'll see you all soon.